This is Words Aptly Spoken, which comes from Proverbs 25:11. A word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in settings of silver. The written word is a precious treasure. We want to preserve written knowledge for God's glory and as an anchor to the history of the church and its classical conversations. We hope to encourage the reading of words and of the word. So welcome to Words Aptly Spoken, where Jennifer Courtney, Timothy Knotts, and I discuss books from the Classical Conversations curated curriculum. Today is Wednesday, December 4th, 2024, and I'm Lee Bortons. We have a special guest with us today, Brittany Lewis. She's our reasoning strand owner for Classical Conversations Multimedia, which means she helps make sure our reasoning curriculum is integrated with everything else, as well as each of the various years our students participate and with their parents. And she's also been a challenge director for a long time, and she's one of the favorite guests that we have because she just knows so much about so many things. So thanks for being with us, Brittany.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind.
Well, it's true. All right, Jennifer, what are we doing this month?
Well, it's going to be a short month due to quarterly meetings and the holidays, but we are still working our way through cultivating classical leaders resources. We want everyone to be really cultivated and equipped. We've been doing this for a couple months now. So we're going to talk about Scott Kreider's book, Office of Assertion today, and then we'll be off for a couple weeks, and then we'll finish up with Angels in the Architecture by Doug Wilson, which is a lovely book to be discussing in December. So...
yeah, it's one of my favorite books. I had a retreat around that. It's one of the very first things I ever did to equip CC moms. There's about a dozen of us went away for 3 days and read that book together. So I look forward to sharing it with our listeners. You can listen to any of our past episodes of Words Aptly Spoken on my YouTube channel at Lee Bortons, or you can go to my website, leebortons.com, and there's the archive of previous years of Words Aptly Spoken, the current year, as well as upcoming episodes so that you know what book to purchase and what we'll be talking about in the future so you can plan to listen. So go ahead, Jennifer, ask me your question.
Well, yes, same one as always. So why did we choose Office of Assertion as one of our recommended books for Christian leadership?
So this book actually came around as my children were leaving the Classical Conversations Challenge program headed towards college. And so a lot of the writing team, along with Heather Shirley and some other folks that have been with us for a while, kept recommending it to me. So I read parts of it and said, yes, this looks really good. We needed something to fill in that rhetorical it's a gap. It was a rhetorical gap that we had because as we'd grown the challenge program, we had more and more students becoming adept at the canons of rhetoric without really knowing what they were good at doing. And, parents wanted to guide them, and our older students needed to have more information. And one of the things I really appreciate about this book is how it confirms that Classical Conversations Challenge program is well named. It actually is on Amazon listed as a university student book, and along with, Southeastern University, where we have not dual enrollment, but concurrent enrollment, where basically they have accredited what our high school students are doing rather than the other way around, which is what happens in dual enrollment. And so they are willing to do that because they recognize our high school program, which is the challenge program, is just as good a preparation as their first few years of college. And so this book fit right in with our students' abilities, as well as the the standards and the levels that the parents and the tutors wanted to grow into so they could share that with the challenge students. And I remember whenever we introduced this book, I got a note from the author because when the first year that we sold it, he sold more than he'd ever sold before, and of course made the publisher wonder, what is this Classical Conversations? So maybe sometime we could have an episode where we talk about, there's a lot of books that we're the #1 seller in the world because we have so many students, and so this is just one of them.
Yeah. Yes, I remember that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
He was wildly excited. I think we even had it as our practicum giveaway book one summer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I appreciate about it too is just how in line Kreider was with a lot of things we were thinking about and talking about. So the canons of rhetoric, that you mentioned, and also the 5 common topics, and just really helping students go deeper in some of the skills that we are already practicing in our programs. But I also really appreciate, as I was looking back over it today, I have several copies of this book, one of which is dog-eared and marked up. And I landed back on one of my favorite quotes from him at the beginning, where he says in the preface, "What both the celebrants and critics of multicultural education have failed to understand is this: culture has always already been multicultural. There is no avoiding either the past or the present, because the important texts of our own present culture are themselves intertextual responses to past ones." And I just love that. That is what our name, Classical Conversations, is about, that we're stepping into those timeless conversations that have been going on. And I appreciated that his quote said that so beautifully, what we're about here, entering those conversations. So
Yeah, because people are so narrow in their thinking in modernity. Like there's 2 or 3 categories that everyone's up in arms about, but you never hear anybody saying, but how diverse are you across the ages? How diverse are you across the continents? How diverse are you across the faiths? And Classical Conversations, because we're classical, addresses all of those, as well as the common DEI stuff that's in conversation today. So I just think that's what leads our students to being such great thinkers, is that they meet all kinds of thinkers.
yeah, we were actually talking to a group this morning that, is interested in partnering with us, and they wanted to know about our students and their writing abilities. And I said, well, one thing is that we start writing at about age 9 and we keep going all the years that they're with us. But also you have to know that we're also doing a lot of reading. So they have lots of ideas that they can write about. It's not just about practicing those techniques of writing. So. Oh, good. All right. Well, Tim, Lee has already alluded to this, but in the beginning, the author, Scott Kreider, does talk about how, while useful for homeschoolers, this book is really aimed at first-year college students. So how and why is this appropriate for our audience?
Yeah. Lee's right that our students are generally writing at an above level or above age level writing competency, which is good. Not all, of course, but many of our students are aiming at something a little higher than your typical high school student is doing around our country. But I think there's a little more to dig at there too. Along the way through classical conversations based education, our students get introduced to different writing skills along the way, right? So we have in the essentials years, they start to learn how to write well with structure and style with their institutes for excellence in writing curriculum, where they learn how to read source texts and develop them into something that's useful and good, and yet not just copying and pasting out of something else the way that a lot of us started doing our own research and writing. And then they begin to study in Challenge A and B and 1 using the Law Schools of Writing curriculum, where the emphasis really switches from the structure and style to thinking well and thinking clearly about debatable issues. And that's great, because that's really the fundamentals of essay writing or persuasive writing of any kind. And by the time they get to Challenge 4, they've been doing that for quite a while. And we start to ask them to do some other things that are of the same sort but bigger, like the senior thesis, for example. That's sort of a mega essay research paper. And and that process necessarily includes a lot of revision, which is something that they haven't been asked to do much of as younger writers. We kind of get them over the hurdle of that polished draft and say, good job, you've practiced hard, you've concluded what we asked you to do. And now, as a Challenge 4 student, we are asking them to take the next step and to really look over what they've done and to look at their own writing with a critical eye, to start to see what can be done better here. How can I be more clear or more persuasive than what I did the first time I wrote this thing. This book is good for many things, but I think that is a particular strength to it that other parts of our writing curriculum haven't yet addressed well. And so this is a helpful sort of, you've arrived at competency. Now let's really strive for mastery.
Yeah, I agree. And part of that mastery is not just their, again, not just their writing techniques, but also their depth of understanding of their own ideas, which comes across in their senior thesis defense, which really is pretty amazing that, 17 and 18-year-olds are in front of a panel of judges defending their ideas articulately. In my last year senior thesis defense, we had quite a funny moment because the first student went up and we had a great panel of judges, a pastor, a lawyer, and a longtime homeschool mom. And they gave him a lot of hard questions, and he did a great job answering those questions. And when he sat down, one of the grandfathers who was in the audience, who I guess missed what we were doing when I described it and was a little bit hard of hearing, turned to his daughter and said, "Hey, who made those people the interrogation panel?" And we were like, well, that was the point for the judges. And they're asking the students to know their ideas and defend them well. So I think Kreider's book does a good job of helping them really know their ideas well. So anyway, well, Brittany, tell us more about Scott Kreider. And then after you tell us about his bio, we'll spend a little bit of time talking about the title and its meaning.
Oh, good. Well, so Scott Kreider he has a PhD. He teaches currently at the University of Dallas, which is in my neck of the woods, and on their lovely campus, which I just got to visit recently with my daughter and husband. He is the kind of mentor that our students would benefit from having. And I think that's why his book is so apt for our audiences, because he speaks with the love of Christ, standing firmly in the stream of Western civilization, and talks about something that he passionately loves. So he wrote this book for his own students, first year composition students, because he knew that they needed this, and that he wanted to produce a book that was useful to them and short enough, and also drew upon some of the more recent research, which he is used to knowing, because he has he's an associate professor of English at the University of Dallas. He served as the dean, looking at the dean of the Constantine College, which is part of the University of Dallas. He ran the University of Dallas writing program for a number of years, as well as its 7 Arts of Language program. He has won numerous awards for teaching, both where he used to teach at the University of California, Riverside, and also at the University of Dallas. He enjoys teaching there, teaching younger students. He's taught over 30 course preparations. His specialties are in Shakespeare and rhetorical studies. He also loves traveling with his wife, who also she works in the library there at the University of Dallas. They're writing a book together on their memoirs of travel, marriage, and Italian life. And University of Dallas has a campus in Rome, and so as often as he gets the opportunity, he goes to teach over there too. So he's quite a wonderful person to sit at his feet and think about rhetoric and why it matters.
I love that. I didn't know some of those details about him, but one thing I really appreciate about his style and the book is it's not very long. It's very short. Compared to most college composition texts, it's very brief and yet packs a huge punch. And he's very, I think, conversational as well in his style. I can see why his students really enjoy, and our students have enjoyed, because it's very approachable and a quick read. So, all right.
So
Well,
let's look for you. So I would say it reminds me of something that's really important, is that in CC, we try to always remember who it is we're working with. And we're working with busy parents and young people. And a lot of our young folks in Challenge are serving their church, they're helping their siblings, they're at work part-time, they enjoy reading books, they have all these writing assignments. And it's a mistake to think a big textbook means they're learning a lot of information. They don't need large textbooks. They just need the best and the smallest amounts that will make it so that their time isn't usurped, so they can't read the books and write the papers they have. So the book reminds me of Strunk's book on, title went on my head, Elements of Style. And then also Stanley Fish's book, How to Write a Sentence. But all three of those books, if you took those three together and treated them as your rhetoric course, as if your children have missed challenge and they're going on to college, you couldn't miss by having those three books. They would be able to recover very quickly what they didn't get to practice in the teenage years.
Yeah. And people don't appreciate often, I think, how hard it is to actually write a text like that, that is so helpful and so brief. That's hard work.
Yes.
So, well, so let's talk about the title Office of Assertion, because we've been talking a lot about writing and we've been talking about Western civilization, and Office of Assertion might not say all those things to everyone. So do you want to start us off, Brittany, on the title and what it means?
Sure. I wrestled with this the first time I read this book because I didn't really understand why he had titled that, and then once I started reading, I thought, oh, that is wonderful. It's a great title. It reminds me of the first quote that precedes the table of contents by Wendell Berry. We are speaking where we stand, and we shall stand afterwards in the presence of what we have said. So students are asserting what they have found to be true, and they are standing upon what they have said. That is the office of assertion. Finding the truth and persuading others to it.
Yeah.
I always just think, I mean, they're asserting something,
Right.
right? They're saying, prove me wrong, and I'm willing to listen, but I'm going to assert this. I'm going to tell you where we're going to start, and I'm going to defend that, and then let's hear what you have to say.
I think.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Tim.
I think that point of it being an office is important. We don't use it that way often in regard to students or writers, but here I think part of the reason why he wrote this book is to encourage the young writers, that when they do the work to try to ascertain the truth and then make that propositional statement, that they're not just doing it, expressing a personal opinion, but that they're standing in sort of an official capacity as a truth speaker, and that they should do that with confidence when they are convinced that they have discovered truth.
I agree. And that office word can mean duty also. And I think that's one of the most inspiring parts about this book, is that he calls on the reader to take up that mantle and to do their duty with nobility and justice.
And it also speaks to another thing we've tried to instill in our families and communities, and that's that idea of your academic work being sacred and part of a liturgy. So office is also a word that gets used with liturgy, the morning office and the evening office. And so I think that's helpful for our students to think about the sacred nature of their work and how it leads to more knowledge of God and ways that they can worship as well. So anytime we can tie that together for them. So
Agree.
All right. Well, so I think we can talk about the preface. So in the preface, which I think probably I just segued to accidentally, Kreider says that, and this is the quote from the preface: last, the book assumes and argues that the writing that students do for teachers matters, that in itself, such writing is perhaps one of the most important intellectual, emotional, and spiritual experiences in the life that students and teachers share. Whatever the soul may be exactly, it must be acknowledged by anyone, teacher or student, who hopes to be a good rhetor. So what do you guys think about that, and the idea that rhetoric and writing and the work our students do is so important?
I think it's hard for students to see that much of the time, not always. Sometimes they get caught up in it, right? They do find an argument that catches their attention and their emotion, and they get very personal about it. But most of the time they look at it as exercises, right? It's just doing what I'm required to do, grinding out yet another paper. And I think this is such a really important encouragement that teachers and students, parents and children need to be together in understanding that everything that they write, um, from that IEW paper all the way up through their senior thesis, um, is important. That it matters, not only that they've put in the effort, but that they've striven to find and share truth.
Do you think maybe we've got it backwards and it's hard to get it out of us because of our academic culture? I'm talking about just not CC, but our age group. That writing was something you did so you could get the grade and be done and check it off your list. And that very few people look at you and say, but I want to know what your soul thinks. I want to know what you want to do for the world. And that's the purpose of the writing assignment. I don't think we do that very well.
No, I think we try to help them with it. Especially with things like the Lost Schools of Writing, where we ask them to enter into a story and ask the should question, because that's necessarily something where you're making a judgment on something, which should engage you, right? You should feel some personal investment in not only what the character is doing, but the rightness or the wrongness of it. But I don't know that you can. I don't think you can instill that in someone. You can try and inspire it, but you can't instill it.
I think that's why the CC curriculum is so important, because it's the only classical curriculum that's not chronological, because we reversed it. We said, let's do what's familiar for those middle school years. And then we get to the big books and the big ideas when they're 16, 17, 18, and they've had much more time to think about things. Because I mean, without fail, every year when I tutored Challenge 3, when the children read their poetry, at least once during the seminar, somebody cried.
Yeah.
Because they were with a safe group who they'd been writing with for 4 or 5 years. And it's not a big group, it's just a dozen or fewer. And sure, students come and go, but there was always 3 or 4 of them that had been around the entire time. And so writing whatever the soul may be, exactly, exposing that takes a lot of trust.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting in the past few weeks, my students all wrote, working with Challenge 2 students this year, and they all wrote our essay on Pride and Prejudice and analyzed the marriage proposals in it, which I think is a fantastic exercise in rhetoric. That is a time when you definitely need to make a claim to another soul, and you better do it in the best way. And of course, the characters in the book don't. That's apparently some kind of requirement in British literature and shows, is that you have really bad, awkward proposals. But I was thinking about this when revisiting this quote today, that to a person in my class, they were all disgusted with Mr. Collins in Pride and Prejudice for proposing without considering the human soul that was in front of him. The proposal has nothing to do with her. It has everything to do and only to do with himself and what he wants. And they all noticed it. And I thought, I wonder if they even realized what an important lesson they just had in rhetoric, and the fact that the human soul that you're sharing of yourself, but also the one to whom you're speaking, absolutely matters. And it was kind of the first time I saw them see it, because they are a little bit younger. And so that was really rewarding for me.
So beautiful. That's one of my favorite parts about this book, is that he reminds us of what Plato's definition of rhetoric is, that it's soul leading to truth. And that's such a countercultural idea these days. Most educators don't even acknowledge a soul. So the fact that our students and our families are considering the souls that they're speaking to, the audience, and taking it upon themselves to really judge what they believe and what they found to be true, and then to persuade others to that thing carefully because they love that person in front of them. That's different. And it really does affect us, as he says, intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually. It's a deeper type of education. I'm with Challenge 4 students, and I see them that this idea really resonates with them, especially at a time when they're, as Lee said, juggling so many things on their plates and trying to do their best, and also struggling against senioritis and all the other things they wrestle with too. This idea is an anchoring one for them.
That's a good word, anchoring. Well, we're actually past time for our break, Lee. We're getting into this book today, so I'll let you take us to our break.
Well, I want to thank our sponsor, classicalconversationsbooks.com, where the books discussed can be purchased. We have the entire 2024 and 2025, and maybe some upcoming 2026 Words Aptly Spoken events at leebortons.com with links to the book site so that you can purchase them. And I know Emma, our producer here, is working really hard to get the 2025 calendar up. And Jennifer's assured me that they've already got it all figured out. So thank you to that team. And just talking about this Office of Assertion, guys, what a privilege it is to have an office where meaning official too, and duty, where it's our duty to help people just love words. What a great office to have.
Yeah.
I agree.
So anyway, we'll be skipping a few weeks like Jennifer talked about, but we're going to go ahead and wrap up the year with Angels in the Architecture, one of my favorite books by Doug Wilson. He's written over 100 books, I just found out this week. Wow.
Knew he was prolific. That's a whole other level.
Yeah, anyway. So let's start talking more about the book. So maybe we'll raise another Doug Wilson among the CC crowd.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've danced around this already, this idea of definitions of rhetoric. A lot of people nowadays have a bad definition of rhetoric, pursuing, convincing someone of something for the wrong ends, like advertising or political sound bites. And we wrestled with that when we were writing the conversation. So a lot of people sadly now think rhetoric is a bad word instead of thinking about what it really means. So Tim, do you want to read us about what Kreider says about the real definition?
Sure. Rhetoric being viewed in a bad light isn't unique to today. It's just particularly widespread today. So he writes this. In philosophy, rhetoric's most thoughtful critics, Plato and Augustine, were both trained in rhetoric, and Augustine was himself a teacher of the art, even after his conversion to Christianity. Nietzsche was a professor of rhetoric. Even the anti-philosopher Jacques Derrida hoped to revive the art of rhetoric, though in its sophistic form. In politics, the founders of the American regime were rhetoricians, in part because they were lawyers, but more importantly because they were liberally educated. And until very recently, a liberal education in the humanities was a rhetorical education. Jefferson, Madison, Lincoln, Katie Stanton, King, these American leaders were all students of the art of rhetoric. Arousing both fear and interest, rhetoric has always been suspect, but it has still, interestingly, always been studied.
Yeah, if you think about one of our books that we have the students read is The Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, and he definitely studied orations in order to learn how to speak so that he could persuade people to the cause, to the rightness of abolition of slavery. So reading about his education gives us a good sense of pursuing a rhetorical education.
I think we have this misapprehension that if we know the truth, that we can just say it and it will be enough on its own. But clear, persuasive communication is actually a real blessing for those who know the truth and can share it. I think that makes us better able to communicate the truth and persuade toward it. It's also dangerous. I think there's good reason to be suspicious of it, because it's powerful, and if it's misused, it can be very devastating. And we've seen that through history, right? As some of the greatest tyrants through human history have been powerful rhetoricians. Um, but uh, but it's almost like, if you have a powerful weapon, you don't abandon it to the bad guys. You need to make sure that you have it in your armament as well to counteract those who have misused it.
Yeah, and oh, go ahead, Brittany.
Go ahead.
Oh, you go.
I was just thinking about how we watch the video Notes from a Tilt-A-Whirl by N.D. Wilson, Doug Wilson's son. And in it, he talks about making our children dangerous. And what he means is to make them sharp arrows. And this is part of our opportunity to help to call them to the right use of rhetoric and to give them opportunities, so many opportunities in CC to practice it. And I've seen that bear great fruit in my own family with some of my kids who were really shy and then others who are really outgoing, and they both need it. We need to practice it so that we can get better.
Yeah, I think that's good too, that you bring us back to the fact that it's not just about the written word, although we do consider teaching them to write very important, but just also the opportunities that they get to speak over and over again and to present to one another and do the basic things like get over their fears, but then also learn to be very persuasive toward the truth.
And I think that, in CC, we've tried very hard to expand the grammar, dialectic, and rhetoric to all humans in their endeavors. And so the student may not pursue beautiful, true words, but they may pursue beautiful, true art or construction or homemaking. That there's that rhetoric side that is looking for truth, goodness, and beauty. And a good meal can persuade people of a lot of things.
That's true.
Okay, well, I think that's a good to go to our next idea, which is the fact that we do have our students read this book in Challenge 4, as we've mentioned, when their theme for the year is growing into leaders who have a sense of duty. And so we've talked about how words have power, and Kreider, his acknowledgement of that. So Brittany, do you want to read our next?
Sure. This power is a good power, even if the student were to misuse it. When a journalist exposes misleading or untrue statements, for example, that is a good thing. What the journalist simply may not recognize or will not admit to the audience is that the exposure is just as rhetorical as the statement exposed. The art of rhetoric is not unjust. Those who use it unjustly are. As Aristotle explains, what makes one a sophist is not the faculty, but the moral purpose. Aristotle believes that rhetoric and sophistry are distinct. Rhetoric is persuasion aimed at the truth. Sophistry is persuasion aimed only at the appearance of the truth. This book then offers a defense of rhetoric. The most important of its proofs is that rhetoric is a liberal art which liberates one both to defend oneself against untrue persuasions and to fashion true ones. Often those untrue persuasions are one's own. After all, we are all familiar with the sophist within, that part of us who arises especially in haste or anger to utter sham arguments that in calmer or more reflective moments we know are mistaken. So rhetoric can free one even from one's own ignorance, disclosing the weaknesses of one's own idea. Having done so, it can then free others. Indeed, in freeing others, one frees oneself.
I think that's no small thing, what he's saying here, that that our students learn to uncover falsehood, both, and I love that he says not just in the arguments of others, but also in their own thinking. So many times over the years, I've looked at something a student has presented or written and just said, is this what you really meant to say? And have been told that that one question that they thought about it over and over with their family because they didn't realize until that moment that they put it on paper that they had gone astray in their thinking.
Mhm.
And so that's no small part of rhetoric, is uncovering those falsehoods.
Yeah. Again, I think that to go back to what we talked about just before our break and the um, if a student does just view a paper as a task to be completed, just something to be jotted down and finished and of no importance or moment, I think they rob themselves of the opportunity to do what this passage talks about, which is to evaluate whether you are thinking clearly as the author. Are we all make snap judgments. We all think we know something is true, and we fall into that trap of being the sophist when we accept the mere appearance of truth in our own thinking. We have to dig in deeply and say, but is what I think is true actually true? And we test it. I mean, it's in the word, Jennifer, we talked about this before, the word essay, right, is to try something, to test something. And the first thing we should be testing is our own ideas, not testing whether we can persuade someone else first, but whether we're right first. And then we can proceed to try to persuade others.
Yeah. And one of the things that I think is one of the places where people can slip into thinking that it is a dry academic exercise is when you say things to students like, your opening paragraph must conclude with your thesis. And so then they think, oh, well, this is a checklist. And instead, what we should be pointing out to them is, no, that is where you need to declare your claim to your audience. And if you don't know that it's right there, then you've probably lost the thread of the argument yourself. Even before you can decide whether it's true or false, you need to know that you're making a claim. And so that's part of that practice of knowing that we're testing truth claims, is saying, no, your thesis needs to be right here and it needs to be clearly stated so that everyone can either agree or disagree with you as you go, and so that you can discover truth together.
This definition of sophist here, I think, is really good. And it reminds me a lot of, say 9 to 14-year-olds, and how, like I had a brother very close in age, and I watched two of my grandchildren that are very close in age, and always just kind of that tit for tat, wanting it to be fair. I'm right. I went ahead and did it the way it was supposed to be, not you. And so sophistry is probably a good sign of immaturity, because they naturally go through that. Toddlers to throw temperatures in their temper tantrums in their toys. There was too many T's there for me. Because they're still sophists. They don't have the ability to quietly argue and logically argue. And I would say that's a lifetime of practice.
Yeah, and I think that's one reason. I mean, you said earlier what a special thing this is for us to love words with people, but I think we've also are privileged to have that lifetime. And some of us now, a decade or more together of having those conversations and being able to challenge one another in a mature way and think about something together without feeling threatened. That's often one thing that's hard for the students, is to take the idea and look at it without being personally threatened. And so that sign of maturity is, can we explore this idea together and maybe even be comfortable that we won't finish the conversation today, but we can keep going and not be afraid of what we're doing together.
I think that's really good too, because, or a good definition of rhetoric, because the five of us have been at this for more than 20 years, trying to get folks to understand what a classical education does, how it's Christian, how it's liberating, how it's free. And, all those parents who wanted the elevator pitch and the sound bite, just so I can understand it and explain it today. And it's definitely one of those things that's taking not just one generation of parenting, but a second generation of grandparenting, because I didn't have the first generation of grammar school. And so our children are going to be ahead of the game because they're going to get all three.
Yeah. Were you having a thought, Brittany?
Yeah, I was just thinking of our students and when they read Plato's Meno, I think in their I love Socrates. I love the way he talks to people, and I think he's funny, and he's also really humble. And he says things like, "I think it's from that one. It may be from a different dialogue." He says, "Love me enough, show me my error. Don't leave me in my error if you love me." And I think that's when we can get used to listening to arguments and countering them and testing our own and testing each other's and doing that peacefully and graciously, we really are loving one another, and others are helping free us from the errors that we carry and that we speak and that we believe that we don't even know are lies we've believed. So I was thinking about that. I love what he says, and freeing others one frees oneself.
Yeah, that was one of the definitions of education that I discussed with my son, is that we're being freed from error. And in order to do that, we have to make some claims and set them out and turn them over and look at them and try again to get at the truth.
Mm-hmm. One of my students recently asked me about a senior thesis. "Well, Mrs. Lewis, do I have to believe what I say?" I said, "Well, yes." Why would you write anything you didn't believe in? You want to be able to have the confidence to have wrestled enough. And it doesn't mean you have to have the final answer or come up with something brand new that no one's thought before. But you have to say, "This is what I think I believe now. This is what I believe right now." And you have to defend it. Otherwise, why are you doing this? Don't do it if you don't believe it.
I've had not just a handful of, it's anecdotal, but students actually telling me I wrote my thesis and in the process changed my mind.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Praise the Lord.
Well, I think we probably are out of time because we love this book so much. We have lots to say today. So do you want to close us out, Lee?
Well, I think we have Sons of my eyes. You can see. Don't we have a couple minutes? We started a little bit late.
Oh, did we start
So,
late?
yeah, let me go ahead and read my paragraph. It's real short,
Okay.
and that might be a good place to actually end. Once focused, an essay must have an argument to govern it, a thesis. What is a thesis? A thesis is a proposition determinate enough to provide unity and coherence to the essay. It declares something about the subject at hand. What it declares is limited in scope, and that limitation ensures that the essay will be about one thing that will hold together the essay's constituent parts. According to Edward Courbet in Classical Rhetoric for the Modern Student, the cardinal principle is to state the thesis in a single declarative sentence. A declarative sentence is a sentence that can be affirmed or denied. That is, it is arguably a sentence about which intelligent and principled people can disagree. Probably don't take enough time to come up with our declarative sentences, do we?
No, and I think that's true. And that's one reason why, like I said, I'm so passionate about the students being able to do that in that opening paragraph. But I was thinking, especially this time of year, I think about this. We had a customer years ago who wrote to us who was disturbed that on the back of the Jesus the Messiah card, it said Jesus claimed to be the Son of God, because in their minds, what they heard was that the claim was false. And so we thankfully got to have a dialogue in which I pointed out that claims always can be true or false, and that the people around Jesus took it seriously enough to plot to kill him. So they took his claim seriously enough. And so I just thought that was, especially at this time of year, I'm always thinking about his coming to us and then his truth claims.
Yes. And that's an excellent place to end. For unto us a child is born. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas, guys.
Merry Christmas.
Bye.